that I didn't go to the Paris meeting. But
why not, by the way?
I mean, we have in this terrible period a lot of very important priorities, and I thought that my presence was not absolutely necessary.
How important is anti-Semitism at the current time?
I have to say it's much more important than the majority of people think. I must say I am deeply impressed by the revival of anti-Semitism, namely in European societies, that I know better. I'm told in the United States there is a similar trend, probably not as intense, and in other parts of the world, but of course the link with the past is particularly relevant in Europe. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a very dangerous trend. What worries me more is not the fact that in some countries there is a rhetorical anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. What is more worrying is the anti-Semitism that directly impacts Jewish communities in countries, and that is, to my mind, particularly relevant today in Europe and a little bit in North America. Other expressions of anti-Semitism are probably more linked to political situations of the moment, but they are not related to the relations within a country between communities. What makes me be much more worried is to see that people are attacked, is to see that historic places are destroyed or at least damaged, and it's to see there is a hate speech and a proliferation of anti-Semitic texts and imagery in the internet, in social media, but very much linked to the fabrics of the societies. This is what
Holocaust
makes me...
denial in Iran?
Holocaust denial is probably not as frequent.
But in Iran,
and I think is not
specifically.
But I mean, I think the credibility of Holocaust denial is today very small. What I think is more frequent and probably more dangerous is the rewriting of history, is what I called Holocaust revisionism, and especially when governments also act for the rehabilitation of officers that were linked to the Holocaust system, and in which we have seen a recent trend of trying to rewrite history in order to rehabilitate their image in their own societies. And this is, I think, extremely, extremely worrying and extremely dangerous, because it establishes a link between feelings that are undermining the society and potential action of authorities.
One thing that a lot of Israelis and American Jews as well say about anti-Semitism is that its most modern manifestation is singling out the one Jewish state for the kind of standard that they ask from nobody else.
I don't see that. If one looks at European society, I don't see that the most important manifestations of anti-Semitism, I don't see them related in any way to the state of Israel or to what's happening now in the relationship between the state of Israel and others. The most worrying are the ones that to a certain extent replicate 19th century trends and figures. And for instance, blaming the Jewish community for the global economic crisis, for the financial crisis and things of the sort. And this is, progressing very strongly, even in the middle class of several European societies. And this, in my opinion, is much more linked to the phantoms of the past than to the realities, the political realities of the present.
The former U.S. ambassador, not the one you had lunch with today.
Not this one.
Not this one, the former one, Samantha Power. On the way out, she said that she's very concerned about, at the UN specifically, the singling out of Israel. There's 20 resolutions every year about Israel, 5 about the rest of the world. And this is at the General Assembly. I'm not talking even about the Human Rights Council and other places. is that the problem for the UN and for...
I think one needs to distinguish what is the Security Council from what is the General Assembly, from which is the Secretariat, and from other different agencies. Some of them with great autonomy in the way they work, like the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, that had an autonomy to formulate its own policies. Others totally dependent on the governing bodies, which are member states. I think it's important to make these distinctions. I mean, because if we don't make these distinctions, then everything is messed up. My position is that from the point of view of the Secretary General and from the point of view of the Secretariat, Israel needs to be considered as a state as all the others, with exactly the same rights and obligations and without any form of discrimination. This is very clear for me. Now, the dynamics of member states are the dynamics of member states, and there we know how things have evolved in many aspects, and how states take position in favor or against this or that aspect that takes place in relation to Israeli policies. But for me, it is very clear that from the point of view of the Secretary General, there needs to be a total respect for a perfectly equal nature of the presence of Israel in the UN and the presence of any other state.
How difficult is it for you as a Secretary General when the environment at the General Assembly and other UN bodies, I noticed, for instance, today you mentioned in your speech the destruction of the temple by the Romans. UNESCO doesn't even mention the temple as a Jewish place.
But again, positions of UNESCO are positions of the governing body of UNESCO. They're not. I mean, it is clear for me that the Temple of Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans. It was a Jewish temple, as it is clear for me that Jerusalem is today a holy city for 3 religions. I mean, these are the facts that nobody can deny.
So let's talk about the organization itself. I mean, you used to be the head of UNHCR. There are 2 refugee agencies at the UN, one for the whole world refugees and one for Palestinian refugees.
It's for historical reasons. I know UNRWA was created before UNHCR, and it has a totally different character. It was created at the time. UNHCR came later.
Is it time to reform?
Again, that would require a complete redefinition of the missions of the 2 agencies, because they operate in completely different setups.
That's right. You had a lunch with the new ambassador to the United Nations. I'm sure you heard in Congress, especially after Resolution 2334 passed in the Security Council, many are calling to cut budgets for the UN if they don't change their way. They don't know those distinctions that you made, but they say if they don't change their ways, then we'll cut budgets to the UN. You saw stories, 40% and so on and so forth. Do you think that is something that may happen?
Look, my position is that I should do the right thing. And to do the right thing for a Secretary General of the United Nations is to be independent, impartial, and to treat everybody equally. And this is what I will do, whatever happens. I am a strong believer that a constructive engagement with the American administration and with the American Congress can allow for the development of a positive relationship, and I will do my best to guarantee it. And I think that people have a much better knowledge about how the UN works than sometimes we think. So I'm not pessimistic about that.
But that's not the question. The question is, Congress is the one that allocates money in the US.
Yes. And I've been in dialogue. I've been in dialogue with members of Congress on this, and I am sure that that dialogue can lead to positive results.
But it's not a secret that in the U.S. there's much more sensitivity to an impression of singling Israel out at the UN than there is in other countries, in Europe and places like that. So do you think that the UN needs to do something in order to change that impression beyond your job?
As Secretary General, it's my duty to be fully impartial. And I will do it. I will do my best also for the UN to work in a way in which all member states are treated equally, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, I don't control member states, and this is also there is beyond the Secretariat, and there is an intergovernmental dimension that is absolutely essential. The Security Council is the body that has a number of very important competences defined by the Charter, and the Charter needs to be respected. I cannot go over the Charter. I am not the boss of the UN. I am the Chief Administrative Officer of the UN, and at the same time, with the capacity to use my good offices, and I intend to use them, in order to allow for this organization to be perceived as positively as possible by all member states.
What about Israel-Palestine? Would you plan anything as a Secretary General to move
No,
that
I have
process along?
no initiative planned. I'm a strong believer of the two-state solution. In my past capacities, I followed very closely the conflict. I have very old relations with Israel. I was good friend of people like Shimon Peres, Yitzhak Rabin,
Ehud Barak also tweeted.
Ehud Barak is also a good friend. Of course, when I started in government, it was with Shimon Peres and Yitzhak Rabin. I remember once during Sharon's government that Shimon Peres and Arafat wanted to meet, but for any reason they couldn't meet in New York, and they came to meet secretly in my office in Lisbon. And I've always been totally at the disposal of both Palestinians and Israelis, without any agenda, but to help for what I believe is necessary, is that the two parties come together and find an agreement to have peace.
Should the Palestinians become a member state, Palestine become a member state of the United Nations?
That, as
Full
you know,
membership.
That, as you know, depends on a decision by the Security Council.
That's a no.
You know what can be expected of the decisions of the Council in the present situation.
Do you support such as a Secretary General? Would you like to have
This is an area
member?
for member states to decide. What I want is to have peace between Israel and Palestine.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very
I
much.
appreciate it.